So I saw an alien invasion and a giant dinosaur tearing apart New York City in the same year. I remember hiding behind the seat and my mom saying, okay, you can look now, you can look now. But when I walked out, I said, wait, where is it? Where's that stuff? I liked seeing that stuff.
Hello and welcome to Everyone Is. I am your host, Jennifer Coronado. The intent of this show is to engage with all types of people and build an understanding that anyone who has any kind of success has achieved that success because they are a creative thinker. So whether you are an artist, or a cook, or an award-winning journalist, everyone has something to contribute to the human conversation. And now, as they say, on with the show. When I think about Dennis Muren, the first phrase that comes into my mind is cinematic visual innovation. From his earliest days helping to pioneer visual effects work on the original Star Wars trilogy, to his work on E.T., to Terminator 2, to his later films like Steven Spielberg's AI and War of the Worlds, this 9-time Academy Award winner represents the best of what movies can provide. So Dennis Muren, welcome.
Sure. Nice to be here.
I want to start very basically. Where did you grow up, Dennis?
I grew up in L.A., La Cañada, which is near Pasadena and Glendale, and outside of Hollywood. But, there'd always be film shoots going on. You see a truck parked somewhere. If there were two trucks, it means they were shooting a movie or a TV show. So I would always, if I was driving, pull over and run out and have a look.
So as a little kid, you were kind of aware that you were living in a company town, and the company town made movies.
Yeah, it was like that, but I was never going to do it because I wanted to do special effects stuff. I didn't want to do regular movies. So, and there was no effects being done really in those days. There were some commercials being done in 2 or 3 places in LA, did commercials. But the big effects films, there was maybe 1 or 2 a year, like Earthquake or Towering Inferno. They were studio movies. You had to be in the union to do them. And so I went around, I tried to get work at Disney, at Fox, when I was really young, and everybody just said, sorry, we can't do anything for you because you're not in the union. And they weren't hiring because they weren't making very many movies. It was a dead end. I was not looking forward or expecting to get a career out of this at all. But it was something I loved to do.
I know that War of the Worlds is a film that you love, the original one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at that movie and you think, oh, I want to do the things that they're doing. Was that how you were thinking about it, or?
No, I think I was about 7 when I saw that. And I also saw The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms the same year. So I saw an alien invasion and a giant dinosaur tearing apart New York City in the same year. I remember hiding behind the seat and my mom saying, okay, you can look now, you can look now. When I walked out, I said, wait, where is it? Where's that stuff? I liked seeing that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I remember going up to Yosemite when they were doing the firefall, the real firefall up there, dropping fire, down 1,500 feet at nighttime, glowing in the dark. I mean, it was unbelievable. And my first trip when I was like about 9 to New York City, and just seeing, the concrete corridors was unbelievable, the scale of everything. So I've always been attracted to some sort of spectacle, whether it's in a movie or real life or something. But I love of course, telling stories, at least effect stories. So not necessarily the whole movies, but movies are something I've always really liked a lot. And I found some friends in LA. There were probably 6 of us in all of LA that were like my age. This is in the late 50s and early 60s that cared about these films. And we all kind of found each other. We were our own group and grew up together and made our little movies together and showed them to each other and all.
How do you find each other? How do you go about finding a community like that?
There was a magazine, Famous Monsters of Filmland, that you could find at a few stores. I found a copy on a trip to San Diego. There weren't many places you could find it. And, I wasn't interested as much in the monsters as the special effects. And that's where you'd see pictures of King Kong or War of the Worlds or something. Because there was no way to see the picture again unless you see the movie again. Mm-hmm. And then you had to stay and see it a second time to try to see it. You couldn't stop it. I tried shooting still photos in the movie theater, and sometimes it worked. I shot still photos and eventually 8mm movies off the TV. I wanted to hold those images in my head. And we all have the same stories. I mean, we just comparing notes recently. We all said, we always thought everybody could hold an image in their head. But we learned because we wanted to see it so much. And how to do that. Just years and years of having to do it. Right now, you can just grab a freeze frame of something, look at it and study it and see 20 versions of it and everything. It's much easier. I think you can probably learn much faster now than you ever could, than we ever could, because there's so much available.
I had someone say to me once, and I can't even remember who it was, that they thought that you as an individual see the world in a different way than other people do. And when I hear you talk about things like going to New York and those big corridors, right? And, the firefall, and obviously you know how you see the world, but you don't know if you see it differently than other people because you live in your own experience. Why do you think someone would say you see the world differently?
I guess they see me from the outside and are comparing me to other people or something. I don't know. And, I thought that a little bit, that everybody could pre-visualize stuff, and they can't. Just realizing that within a couple of years, realized that not everybody could do that. And I'm sure everybody in some skill probably goes through the same sort of thing, because you only know what you are, who you are, I don't know.
Thank you for answering that esoteric question. I appreciate it. I know, like, in the 60s and 70s, the studios were struggling, right? So they initially had their own visual effects units that were attached to the studios. You talked about getting into the business was tough. I think you were looking at being some sort of doctor at one point, weren't you?
I think that sounds great. Being a doctor sounds great. Unfortunately, I had no skill and no experience being a doctor. And I was looking through the LA Times for a job and saw inhalation therapy. And I said, what is that? And I looked at it and said, it's how to treat people, who've had lung problems like pneumonia or something, to breathe again. And it said it's very easy to learn, and you can make, I think it was $1,200 a month or something like that. And I thought, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to want to do. I don't want to work in a factory or something like that. I just would get bored, but this would be a little more interesting. So I was about ready to do that. And we had a sort of a lucky thing happen at Cascade, which is a company doing commercials, Pillsbury Doughboy and all. They were struggling for like 10 years and finally closed up, but managed to restart the effects department under a friend of mine, Jim Danforth. And I got hired there to be the head cameraman of the place, being effects cameraman, really what it was.
Okay.
So I got in the union doing that. I decided I wanted to get in the union instead of being an outsider. That's the rebel. I'm never going to join the union, but if you really want to work, I wanted to. So I got in that way. And then that group, we all folded in 1 year. Cascade was amazing. It was like the MGM of television commercials. They had like 3 or 4 sound stages, big stages in Hollywood in commercials all the time, things you've heard of, and you could go through and learn everything about how to light hair, Phil Kellison, my boss, he knew how to take a silver dollar and make it look like it was worth $1 million only in the lighting, how to light something in such a way to make it much bigger than it ever was. And I saw examples with people doing that with models, people doing it with cans of soups and stuff like that. Faces, so you kind of learn the tricks of lighting and photography and all that, which is what I was really interested in. And somewhere around this time, I also got onto I pulled my car off at a school in Hollywood. I can't remember quite where it was, Los Feliz, where they were shooting a lot of movies. They're always shooting there. So I got out there and ran off just to see what was going on. And I'd been doing that a few times. And I noticed that the film crews, that there seemed to be a place that was very important. And that was where I could see, the cameras there. Okay. And there'd be 2 or 3 people around there talking, and there'd be all the other people wandering and setting up. But I realized that is the place I want to be. If I'm going to ever get in this business, that's where it's happening right there. It's around. I didn't know who they were. I figured cameraman, but I don't know who the other guys are. So I always thought, if I ever can do it, I don't want to be one of the guys cleaning up or doing this or building that. If I could do it, I don't know if I could, but in that group. And I also had noticed the few times the guys were nice enough to invite me to a shoot, a miniature shoot. I went out to 20th Century Fox tank in Malibu a couple of times and watched Bill Abbott, LB Abbott, shooting stuff with a crew of 40 people and wave machines and a big spectacle. And it was a whole deal. They were the nicest people in the world. And I'd realized the most important job in doing effects is the cameraman, because he has the button. And Bill would not shoot anything until it was right in his mind. And so I always was thinking, that's the job I'm going to want if I ever do effects. If it's a union, if you're in a union, that's where it's got to be. So I decided, okay, I'm going to be a cameraman. I kind of knew I'd light, but also if it ever happens to me, he's the guy with the final button. And I've got ideas in my head about how things should look. So I had no problem imagining, looking at a storyboard or an idea, instantly I have a visual view of it in my head all right away. Whenever anybody's talking about it, I do that. So that's the job I wanted. So that's why I got into the union. I had a chance to get into the union. I said, I'll be a cameraman. That closed up, Cascade closed up. And 3 months later, I heard about Star Wars that was being done in the San Fernando Valley. I knew some friends that went to actually talk to George about doing the effects, and they said, nothing's going to come of this film. He wants to do it, throwing models by the camera and everything. And it needs to be controlled, and stop motion was the way we were all doing stuff in those days. I was in the very archaic film school, still using techniques from the 20s and 30s, because that's all my little group ever knew. And at that time, George was not talking to John Dykstra or anything. He was not talking about anything. So I heard the film, looked like it was actually going to happen, and I approached them to work on it and managed to get hired on it.
How do you get the chutzpah to do that? Like, you just approached, hi, I'm Dennis. I want to work on your movie. What is it? What motivates you to get to that point? How do you get there?
I was out of work, 3 months out of work. I'd loved George Lucas's movies. I said, I want to meet this guy. I was curious about the work in 2001, all done differently than anything I'd ever seen before, and not knowing quite how it was ever done. That's where it was happening. And I said, okay, I'm just going to have to do it. And I heard John Dykstra, who I didn't know. I got their number somehow out there, probably from my friends that had visited George and Gary and said, oh, that's not going to be anything. They probably had a phone number. I don't know. Or maybe I called Gary or something, not knowing him either. But I tracked down where I was and just called up, and they said, okay, come on in. And that's the way I remember it. Now, Phil Tippett says he remembers hearing somebody who was working out there about him and said, Dennis should call this guy and try to get work out there. But I don't remember that part of the story at all. So I don't know which it was. Probably both happened, actually. So anyway, I ended up getting onto the show. And the good thing about it was, if I'd gone into a big Hollywood film, it would have been lost, because all the old techniques, you have to learn them. All the gear, you have to learn them. Nobody knew anything about how this was going to be done, except John had an idea for the technology, but none of us knew about literally how do you move these motors with a knob, and you may have 12 motors doing a complicated shot with all the camera moves and the model itself moving in front of a blue screen, 30 or 40 seconds to record one motor. And then you got to do it for each axis, and you put it all together, and you want a really nice motion. I always put in spaceships, I put a skid into them. Whenever they're going like airplanes do, they sort of skid. I put into everything I do, something you can relate to. I'll find something in there that makes it human, but it makes the programming of those stuff harder. But I picked it up really fast. And I think it was because John Dykstra knew that I'd done stop motion. He'd seen the stuff I'd done and thought, this guy understands unusual film speeds. He can do stop motion 1 frame at a time, but imagine the 24 frames a second. He could probably do this. And John was absolutely right. So I really took to it, and it took us all a while, but managed to do it. So that was it. And then I had 4 days off after that and went right into Close Encounters.
Well, that's a totally different speed of a film, right? Star Wars is very dynamic and very energy driven, and Close Encounters is very contemplative, and it leads you down a slower path. So how do you approach those, being a novice, because you had just done one movie?
First of all, I'm not figuring everything out. That is coming from the director, whether it's George or Steven. And the supervisor, whether it's John or Doug Trumbull, they've got a strong opinion on how it's going to be. Half the work had already been done on Close Encounters. So right away, it's a lyrical movie. It's almost spiritual. It's all more illumination of light, slow motions on things. And I don't have any problem doing that over Star Wars. It's not like Star Wars is who I was. The motions, that was you just adapt to the show and you learn over time. Because anyway, that wasn't difficult. If they had everything worked out, all I was really mostly on Close Encounters was like a big babysitter. I made sure the shots got set up right, followed all the lighting stuff that had already been laid out by Richard Urasich and Doug Trumbull, according to what Steven wanted. So it was 6 months of that to shoot. I don't know how many shots. I ended up being the mothership in the movie. I had no idea that's what I was going to be doing. I thought I was going to be in the corner somewhere. And it wasn't until a few days I realized, oh, this is the end of the movie. Okay, I'm fine doing that. Anyway, that was great. And meeting, I'd never worked with Doug before, of course, but meeting Steven was fantastic. So after Jaws, so in that short span, I met both George and Steven, two amazing filmmakers that were like about my age. We were all contemporary, and they were all wonderful to work with. They all had strong visual opinions about things, and they could just make decisions instantly. And I had a visual connection because I think we all are the same age, or we all grew up watching the same stuff.
Yeah.
And even though they're writers also, they're also visual. That's why they want to get in there and make these visual movies. It was neat. It was neat.
It's really interesting because going back to what you said earlier about taking pictures in the movie theater, trying to capture that feeling.
A moment, just capture an image, something you could look at and you could study it. You could look and see the composition, anything.
And like you've said, it's not like you can do now and go on YouTube and freeze frame something and find like an old Godard movie and go through step by step. Like you had to capture it, right? All of you as filmmakers at that time were doing was like, I'm capturing something. I'm capturing a visual. I'm capturing an emotion. I'm capturing so much. So yeah. So you did Close Encounters. And then where did you go?
Then we kept thinking, I was thinking, George has got to do another Star Wars, but he wasn't saying, I didn't ever see him after the show was over. I don't think, I might have seen him somewhere, I don't know, but not on the sequel, Star Wars or anything. But we started hearing that he might do another one. But I went back to work with John Dykstra, who had not gotten along with George. And he was doing Battlestar Galactica, which was all based on Star Wars sort of thing. And I'm thinking, my God, what the hell is this? And it's an amazing example of what Hollywood can do. You look at Star Wars, you've got a template for how to tell these stories. And you look at Galactica, which has some good things, but also has some old things in it. And they actually had a template to look at when they did Galactica, but they missed a lot of it, of what was going on in Star Wars to keep that really going. So it was not a very satisfying 6 months that I was on that show. Tried some really neat shots, though. I was getting more and more visual and more aggressive about compositions and did some very interesting things in it that I learned a lot about motion control. With that 6 months on Close Encounters, I had a chance to think about what we'd done in Star Wars and what worked and what didn't work. And I tried it on Galactica and really had it all figured out how to program the stuff and what you can, thinking visually, spatially, more than like sort of flat planes moving like in 2001 sideways, or it's more complicated stuff. Along came an opportunity to go up north, and I moved from LA then up to San Francisco and said goodbye to my friends and family. I brought 4 or 5 of my friends up with me, Tom Sanamon and Phil Tippett and John Berg and Ken Ralston and a couple others. We all came up and worked on it together. And that was the hardest show I've ever worked on, and maybe it might be the most satisfying. I think so, but it was so hard and just rewarding because it went everywhere that Star Wars didn't go. There were so many different planets with different types of effects on them. And I was credited as the effects cameraman, but I was really an effects supervisor on the show along with Richard. So I decided, let's do the stop motion. Let's do the asteroid sequence this way. I laid out my sequences, whatever they were, and started at the beginning, really, for the first time, being able to say, starting with how I imagined the end result, backing up and looking at the technology and how then we could do it as efficiently as possible without breaking the bank and making shots that were like you had never seen before.
Yeah. You talk about the complexity. So like Empire, Jedi, complex shows, right? But you've worked on shows that had simpler things to solve, right? Like where it doesn't have 15 different planets or it doesn't have a really complex effects sequence that you have to figure out. How do you shift your brain to solve the smaller problems and the bigger problems? And which one's more exciting for you? Do you find peace in solving the small problems?
I don't know. Everything has to look real and everything has to be compelling. And on top of it, everything has to be emotional. So how do you make a shot emotional? Because the big advantage we got over photography is that we have time going by. So the emotion can change during the shot. So you try to build all that into it. The simplicity, I had that all in Empire. I had the Walker sequence, which I consider a simple sequence. It was all stuff that, Like you instantly figure out with big backings and sets and stop motion. And that was pretty straightforward. You get the asteroid sequence, you can't tell what the hell you're looking at in the first few dailies. It was so complicated visually. It's like, this is never going to work. I can't tell the story. And then that's where you have to figure out how you move objects and light objects and framing to be able to tell that story clearly. So I go either way. It's something that could be really simple, I suppose, would be like E.T. You'd think that would be a simpler show. Maybe it was, but we got into shots like that I really made sure, like the bikes are flying off into the setting sun, that the light in that looked like your memory of the moment, not like what it really looked like, but everything's heightened a little bit. The colors are a little bit more colorful, because that's what I think kind of movies are anyway. They're like your memory as opposed to a documentary. And all the people working on them, they're all adding stuff too. So I want to add something that I think is going to help the show. So I can shift back and forth between hard and easy easily.
It's interesting because I think about Stanley Kubrick's films, for example. He just does such intricate color mapping for mood in the work that he does. And, you're talking about that shot in E.T. where it's the heightened reality and what a kid would feel like if they really were riding a bike up in the sky, right?
Yeah, and what your memory is of it. Like just after it happened, what's your memory? Right.
Do those ideas come to you kind of immediately, or do you marinate on them, or do you get those light bulb moments, or is it a combination of it?
It can be any of them. It's not like it's a dawning, like I have a checklist. Okay, I got to figure the lighting out here. I mean, you get into it and you say, oh, I see where this is going. And it seems appropriate. Other times this is the way you're going to put it into the film. But the thing is, we've usually never seen the film in advance. So we don't know if we're right or not. And I'll be on the set a bit and I'll be able to talk to Steven a bit. But it's not like, there is the Kubrick color design for everything like that. I don't think I'd even be good at that. So I see it more as a shot by shot thing, and that seems to work. I was, to a certain extent, copying Alan Davio's lighting that he was doing in E.T. for the live action. So it all did seem to fit. But just doing this other bit to it that he probably would have done too if he was lighting something like that really big. So I'm aware of those things that are going on. But again, if you think about the fact that you've never even seen the movie, it's amazing that they all come together. But it's because we all think a lot about it, and we all talk a lot about it too.
And the story drives it, right? It should always.
Oh yeah, the story. Yeah, but the story certainly drives the emotion. That's where you probably get the idea. Okay, this does have to be an uplifting moment. This has to be a satisfying but still dangerous moment. Or this time has to be a moment that looks like we're never going to get out of this. Oh, we are. Oh, wait, no, we're not. And that's all going to happen in 2.5 seconds. So, and I'll try to fill in those things, because that stuff often the director won't even know what he wants in the shot. He's done some storyboards. They're usually not in the board. The board will have an example, kind of the camera view with some kind of, you see the threats or whatever it is going on, the emotion in it. But how you fill up those 2 to 5 seconds is pretty much up to me. And that's where I think all my liking movies and loving them and seeing them and feeling them and enjoying the reality of life and how it changes and relationships, I make sure that stuff's in there, because it's opportunities. Just like an actor's doing, the whole thing is opportunities. You got 5 seconds to do something, you got a 2-minute shot. What are you going to do with it? What's an actor going to do with it? You're not just standing there saying your words, you're adding something to it. And most departments do it. Camera guys do it. I do it. Actors do it. Writers certainly do it. Everybody.
Yeah, I see it sometimes in acting performances where there's just a singular gesture that someone makes. And it could be very simple and very small, but it's just the perfect moment and the perfect gesture for what you're trying to indicate in that scene. Everybody does that in their different roles.
And what you may not be aware of, and I'm not really aware of very much, is how that character is creating that whole role so that when they decide to do the gesture, it stands out. Are they big? Are they small? Are they distant? For the entire role, for all the regular scenes, they're talking and listening. That's all a decision. It's so complicated what they're doing. And then and then to think some of it can be figured out. They could have a script that's full of notes and everything. But ultimately, it comes down to instinct, which it probably does to me and most people too. Do you feel it as you're doing it? And whatever. That's important to have an emotional connection to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's some goal. Maybe it's not a clear goal, or maybe the goal is not to be clear, but just
Right.
for more of you are acting. Yeah. I don't go into much. I know some folks do, but effects people do, but I don't go into it not knowing what's going to happen. I pretty much at the beginning want to know what's going to happen. And I may want to try this. We're not sure how it's going to play out, but I pretty much know the feeling I want to get from it, no matter, and I don't care how we get to it. And if their surprise is great, but not like a serendipity sort of thing at all.
Here's a question for you. Sometimes when you're doing something creative, particularly you're in a creative industry, and you do it as your job, right? It can sometimes feel like a job, and you lose a little bit of spark around the initial joy that you had around it. And have you ever hit that wall? And how do you overcome that? Because everything has its ups and downs, right?
Yeah, I think all the time. After doing Empire Strikes Back, I said, that's everything I ever wanted to do in movies. That was it. But I didn't want to leave because I was enjoying it. And I got to Dragon Slayer after that. And I'd never done anything. I love dinosaurs and stuff like that. Not love them, but it was neat to see them on the screen. But I got a chance to do some. So, yeah, that goes on all the time. You have to keep yourself motivated. And the nice thing that we've got at ILM, I could pretty much do a show a year. And the directors were often different. So you've got different challenges all the time and different people to work with and crews and goals and everything. So there is new stuff you need to come up with and you want to. But all the time, yeah, I'd say I couldn't say how many times I went up and, I've had enough of get out of here. And I didn't like the way the industry was changing. But then you think about it, no, that's the way it is. It always goes through changes.
Mhm.
And it's an amazing business to be in. Where are you going to be working with dozens and dozens of creative people that care what they're doing and want to get along, and they want to all add something to it? And there's layers. So it's so complicated, and it somehow fits, and you get it all at the end, and you think it's the end, but no, it's just the end of the day. And then you get all those pieces together, and it's the end of that. And then you get all those pieces together in your movies then. And then it ends up in the theater and it's another end, It's great. It's a really amazing business to be in.
Well, and something's interesting too is like sometimes you work on something and you're so in it, and then you finally see it as a whole, and maybe you have some distance from it, and you're like, oh, I hadn't even realized that about this movie. I created something that I hadn't even expected based on what I was contributing to it, which is an exciting part of it as well. What do you do when a director and you don't agree on a path?
You just do it. First of all, you want to hear maybe he's got an idea that's really good, and this is not your way of doing it.
Mhm.
But if there's something you're missing, then I'll always bring it up, and they'll always listen to me, and they'll always say, well, I want to try it like this, and we'll go ahead and do it that way. Always. I'm not going to go against anybody like that. Who am I? He's the director. He may see things where there may be an accident with it, So I haven't had it that I can think of any big argument about anything, It's because the directors, their job is much more complicated than what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get the daily done. I'm trying to get these great 7 or 6 seconds or 3 seconds. They're doing that with 2,000, 3,000 shots of 5 versions of each of it with all the actors and everything. They know all that. They know what they can save and what they can throw out and how my work can be cut or trimmed and put a certain way with a certain type of music, and it'll work. And I recognize that skill that a good director and editor and score and everything is going to make my stuff look great. So I'm not hung up on just my contribution to it at all.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah, because it is a collaboration, right? It's an orchestra piece that everyone's playing their different parts in. So you can't.
But in some way, we don't know what the other parts are going to do with it. And I'm fine with that. Maybe it's a jazz piece. Yeah. Oh, hey, look, he cut the end of that. Oh, he cut it in half. Oh, my God. Now it's telling a different story. It's better, So it's all sorts of things.
One of the fun things, too, I think you see that is the discovery of accidents, right? When you make a mistake on something, you're like, oh, that's actually better. I'm glad I made that mistake because now it's contributing to something I wasn't expecting.
Could be, yeah. I don't remember any of those, but I probably did have those, but I don't have memories of those.
Are you telling me you've never made a mistake, Dennis?
I'm sure I have, but I've got to turn it into an asset because we got to get it done.
You've had a long career, and you saw the transition from the more practical optical side of visual effects, right, into computer graphics like Jurassic, Terminator 2. And you talked about, sometimes the changes in the industry can be challenging, but did you ever find like the technical evolution challenging, or was it something you're like, all right, man, let's do this. Let's go for it?
I have never been interested in the technology. From the olden days, from having the cameras and loading the cameras and building this and getting the pyro right and I've never cared about that. It's always been the image, the end result. That's why I had no problem adapting to motion control, because I was trying to fly little spaceships when I was a kid and they never moved right. Didn't look like they fit in the star field. The stars never looked right. So, when it came to doing complicated and stuff that we were doing at ILM with 50 people or 100 people, the models you're getting are better than anything I could do. And everything is better than I could do. That's why the idea of being a supervisor or whatever they were calling, which is really we're directing, but the academy said we couldn't be called directors in the 1940s. Right. So we're just supervisors. That it's great to have that amazing craftsmanship and skill and all the art that everybody's putting into it and being able to manipulate it in a certain way, following the director's advice most of the time, but putting my own into it to be able to get whatever it is. It's just terrific. But the tool didn't matter. It was frustrating like digital. I think digital could have happened 5 years earlier, but it was slow. There was no film person, as far as I'm concerned, in there. There was championing getting digital like comping and digital rendering to look real, that had a background enough to say this works and that doesn't work, and this works and that doesn't work. So after The Abyss, I took a year off. But it wasn't to do that. It was just, I just worn out. I got to take a break. But of course, you can't do that. And I started reading a computer graphic book that was like 1,600 pages, made for doctorate degree kids going into computer. I didn't understand a word of it, but I understood it was not magic. And it was, if you could specify anything, you could pretty much write a tool for it and do it. The fact you could have something 20 stops too dark or 500 stops too bright or whatever, you could do it digitally. It all depended on how bright the light was or how dark, and you were telling it how bright or dark to make it. Was it a laser light or it didn't matter. You could do anything with it. So I just said, my God, that's amazing. I think I'm not afraid of it. I think I can adapt to it as long as there's people that know how to do that. I had people long ago say, you don't want to learn this stuff. You want to be the boss of this. It takes too long to learn it, whatever it is. This was photographer or camera work. You don't want to be a camera guy. He said, you want to be the boss. I heard a camera guy told me that. So anyway, that's what I did. Then I got in and I worked on trying to solve the input-output, because we didn't have any way to, after The Abyss, the work was so great, we still had to do optical composites, which were not quite there.
Right.
They're very hard. You almost can do them. So I put all my effort in for a while to solve the digital problem, which we'd had something from Kodak that had the wrong specification we've been using for 3 years to try to film it out. Kodak was making this tool to scan in home photos that you shot from your negative camera, and they had a resolution of 4,000 pixels. And that's why everything was going nowhere, because there was no hardware to store data that big. And that's one of the first things I questioned. I said, why do we need that? Well, Kodak says, here's the document. So I said, yeah, but that's a still photo. Well, imagine on a big screen. And I said, yeah, but imagine on a big screen going through a projector and it's shaking 24 times a second. It's blurring everything. So we did a test at 2,000 and it worked. And that whole problem went away. So then, which was major. That could have been 5 more years to solve that. But then we went in and I worked on getting the colors right and narrowing the color thing down. And then we had no output device, and I ran around and managed to track down, I think it was a $20,000 unit made by management software for making business slides. And what it was is a really beautiful quality CRT, like your TV set, but much better than your TV set. And they had an Acme animation camera shooting on it, photographing that. And it was all in a box, 3 feet tall and a foot on each side and a plug-in, and you could buy it and it worked. And they were making it for business slides. On a computer, somebody would make the pie chart and show how much your sales are going to be. And you could give that to put it in this machine, and it would, on the screen, make that image. And then the camera, which was normally actually meant to shoot movies, being an Acme, they were doing 1 frame at a time. So you could shoot 500 frames or 5,000 and cut it up, and you have 5,000 slides for the 5,000 salesmen that are going out that need all those slides. And the quality was great. And I was thinking, my God, could this possibly, the quality, the color, the granularity that you saw on a TV screen, maybe it doesn't show on this because it's a military quality tube. And we did a test of it. We managed to get a frame from something we scanned in the Back of the Future, and the thing worked. And that was it. We had the input, we had the output, and ILM already had the middle part, the image processing, along with Photoshop, which we didn't really use for that, but we used a little bit. But that was it. I could put that into T2, and suddenly you've got stuff that there's nothing you can see that's a flaw about it. There's no matte edge. You could look at it, composite it on the screen, and change this and add that and make it better and embellish it and surprise it and add all this stuff. And then that, of course, led to everything else. Death Becomes Her was after that, which got into Skin, and then we got into Jurassic and all the other stuff afterwards.
But here's the thing. You didn't have Google. It wasn't like, I'm going to Google these things and figure out where I could find something. So how did you find that?
Well, I found them with what's called a telephone.
A telephone?
It was not wireless. It was not wireless in those days, but it was asking around. And I was real cautious. I thought, if we're ever going to solve this, ILM should be the one that solves this. We were so much into the motion picture business. I was kind of sneaky, and I ended up talking to Ray Feeney, a really nice guy. Didn't know him. He worked was doing stuff at Rhythm and Hughes, but he had the management graphic stuff because they were filming out of Rhythm and Hughes commercials, doing of Tony the Tiger and all that were all done with CG, but it wasn't of human people walking, and it was all like, and you go to a movie theater and you'd see between the shows, you used to have some crazy CG thing of Candy walking along and a Coca-Cola. It used to be cartoons, but then in the 80s, it went into computer graphics. And I kept looking at this saying, how come we're not used to something like this? Does it work? And everybody was saying, it'll never work, it'll never work. So anyway, Ray didn't think it was going to work. I don't think management graphics ever thought it would be able to make a tonal image from black to white of all the colors necessary and be stable and not like some sort of flicker, electronic thing that we didn't know from the way it was built. But the thing worked, and they ended up getting a good SciTech award for it. They should have management graphics for doing that, for building that. I have always been on a crusade for the supervisors to be choosing the future, not the departments that they were into the future, because that could have been happening 2 or 3 or 4 years earlier. The soups got to go in there with something they say they know from the shows, right, that is needed. And if it's not there, figure it out.
And it's kind of like when a director comes in and says, I have this thing I want, figure it out for me, right? It's that sort of leading, that desire leads the innovation, right?
Right. Or else the supervisor is going to say, oh yeah, I know something like this. We did it on this show. And we did that on that show. And if we put this together, we'll have the shot. Great. Really? Yeah. Is that really great? Or do you have in your mind an idea like, wait, that's going to look very familiar. I'm going to come up with something different. So you've got to have a goal, and my goal was this stuff to look like perfect and be infinitely flexible. And like my mind is.
Yeah.
Or was.
No, is. One of the things that I've always thought is really interesting about you is you always have a really good sense about what an audience will forgive and where the focus really is in an image. But in your time working in movies, how do you think the audience's perception has changed? And how does that impact things now?
On one hand, I'm surprised that there's so much weak image out there that the audience doesn't care about. The audiences now, but they never did. They were before they'd have it. Suddenly they'd break into song and a dance number somewhere in Oklahoma or who knows where it was. It was never believable.
Right.
But because we're in effect so much, and most of the clients have wanted us to make it look really real, that it doesn't seem to matter if it doesn't in a lot of films. You've got to get 3,000 shots done. There's not the money to make them all perfect. And it could be that even if to make it perfect, you've got to slow things down so the gravity is correct, or the character has time to respond when it hits the ground and gets up, or you have time to see the bridge breaking the right way or something. That might slow the movie down. So it could be the director's got a point when he just says, no, I just want her faster. I don't want her faster. And maybe the audiences don't care because they're just in another space than I am in.
Yeah.
Or we all were. It's like just a change in the culture. I don't like it because I wouldn't enjoy working on those shows at all, where reality doesn't matter. And you're almost like letters and words. You're just getting this done and this done, that amount of time, and it's boom, and it's done. And just, put it together. Perfect for AI to do that stuff.
Yeah. What do you think about AI? What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know. Who knows what it's going to do? I think movies and television and music are fashion. And fashion is based on how we feel about something 3 weeks later. I love this. I bought this. Wait a minute. And it doesn't seem so good anymore. Anyway, oh, look at that over there. There's something over there I like better. The climate changes. So things go in and out of fashion. And I don't know how their AI or care if they're going to be able to keep up with fashion. It's easy to turn out scripts, I think, and to do effects nowadays. How you do memorable ones, I don't know if a computer can do it. They're not our mind. It's not our mind. And good filmmaking comes from, I think, a human thinking through the way humans are going to react to it as the story's told.
A lot of the stuff I see feels very, that's a cool image, but what it's compiled together from a bunch of other things that maybe not map together. And it feels very flat to me, like emotionless. And what I love about movies is the emotion that you get out of it.
Right.
Are there filmmakers that you are excited about now? You having worked with the greats like Spielberg and George.
I can't, I'm sort of so out of the contemporary stuff. I'm into like completely different sort of things. The stuff that the Dune guy's been doing, I think the work looks great. Yeah. I like some of the Chris Nolan stuff is fabulous in there. As far as I wish they go a little bit farther than they do, but that's my taste on it. But I understand why the holdback or whatever. But they're great filmmakers, and of course, Stephen and George and all those guys and Cameron, I can't pull anything out, but I'll look at something. I don't know if you've seen Tangerine. It's been out for a long time now, great vision, great performances, great writing, on an iPhone 5, give me a break. And a lot of people thought, and Sean Baker was saying, we're out there, we're shooting this thing and nobody, you couldn't even tell we were shooting stuff because the sound equipment was bigger than the camera. So they could shoot on streets and everything. It's better. I think you can see it in the performances. You can see the reality in it, but it's uncomfortable for producers to try something like that. Uh-huh. So they've got to have their comfort zone. Everybody's got to be protected because films are so expensive. And if they're not expensive, you're doing something wrong. And they're not happy making a $3 million or a $300,000 movie. The studios have always wanted to have big successes, but more so now probably than ever. So it's just a different world. On the other hand, anybody can make a film. I did my little film, when in 16 millimeter, and I sold it and it played in the theaters and everything when my second year in college, summer vacation. Back then, if you could do it, it's so much easier now to do it. So I'm always surprised that there's not more of that going on, but it's picking up. More and more people are making indie films really on the cheap, and I'm glad to see it.
And also there's so many perspectives that you can get into that I think is so interesting.
Yeah. Try telling that to AI. Let's say, I want a different perspective, and you'll get a different angle change. And that's all it can see. By perspective, okay, angle. No, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah. I want to see somebody's heartbreak in an image. Like I want to see someone in love or I want to see someone being powerful. You want that feeling from it. And so that kind of brings me to my last question. Is there anything that you want from a movie that you have yet to see? What would be your dream thing to see from a movie?
You have to ask me after I've had some time to think about that. I don't think so. You know, and I would think why, because it's so easy, at least with my experience and at my age, to visualize anything. I'm not in wow as much as I used to be. I used to be in wow, I've got to be able to do that myself. And I used to be in wow, oh, look, I worked on something that went beyond that. And now I don't even have to work on it, but the ideas I have spatially, completed ones in my mind are, so rich already that when I see a big film that works, I'm very satisfied and very glad that whole group got together and managed to turn something out really big and great, and they did it. And that those little things were terrific or whatever, but it's not so much a big wow to me because I'm still looking at it on the screen. And in your mind, you're living it.
Dennis, what are you doing
Aaron,
now?
thank you for asking that question.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very simple saying goodbye to work. I didn't think it was, but I'd been thinking about it for like over 5 years, preparing for it in 10 years. And what I decided to do is I wanted to go back to, when I was born, right? You're born and you're 5, and then you get up to like 15 and that's a really exciting period of exploration. And then you kind of settled in something when you were 20 or something like that. And movies is one of the things I did. So I thought, that's okay. Here's the beginning chapter. Then I got the Hollywood movie San Francisco chapter. Now I got my final chapter, which is okay. Everything comes to an end. What did I miss in that first part that I loved? And it was music. And I can't play an instrument. I can play the piano and I can kind of play a guitar. But what I loved was some classical music, but mostly really good pop that everybody was just, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. From in the late 50s, 60s, into the 70s, into the 80s, the synthesizers. And I got sort of wearing out and nothing beyond that. And I wanted to understand it. So what I've been doing is I'm just totally into that. And I can understand it now. And I'm not right. I don't even know if I'm going to write it, but I want to understand it. And the technology is there now to do it. Whereas before you'd hear something, you have to like kind of, I'm pulling out that piano. Can I hear it? No, it's going. I can't quite tell how that piano line, because that piano line, I think, is what moved me during this part of the song. But then it comes and goes. Well, now you can find all the piano lines. You can find any song has been broken down into karaoke versions by expert musicians, just experts. And you can buy them like 10 tracks, 15 tracks of karaoke versions, $3. And they're beautiful reproductions.
Yeah.
If you ever wanted to be able to figure out how music is made. And you can do it with some classical music in there too. The same thing. So I love that because I loved it so much as a kid. I don't know. My goal was never, though, to be a performer, and it isn't now, but I'm hoping to be able to maybe actually start writing some simple things. I tried that a little bit when I was at ILM, but I just got too bonked with the show and couldn't, I had no time to think about it. But now I have nothing. I sort of have nothing but time, which is not true, but you're so busy. But I have a lot more time than I did when I was working. So that's what I'm doing. So I've got like 200 karaoke versions of 200 of my favorite songs that I've already got. And just saying, wow, that's unbelievable. So I totally appreciate musicians arranging, writing, which is almost incidental to what the purpose of those guys were doing in the first place. They kind of work. But I guess it's the technical stuff and the emotional response from it.
And that's so interesting because that goes back to emotional response that you had to images when you were a kid. And now you have that emotional response that you're pursuing with music.
Yeah, full time. Like I was doing for 35 years or 40 years at ILM, right? So now I can do it to something. I was also doing it when I was younger too. So, and I'm not that there's a goal or anything like that, but it's just, it's amazing. It's like a whole new chapter of something I didn't even think, if it had been for technology and allowing people and people wanting to do this stuff, and then I'd still would be trying to hear how this song was made and I've got them all on track. I've got all mixers. I got the sliders. I mix them. I try them different versions and everything. I'm going to go in and change bass lines and see, does that make an additional emotional response? Have I made it better or have I ruined it?
Right.
But there's no goal in any of this. So it's nothing like that, just for fun. The goal is just to move me, get me like, wow, look at that. And so you're looking 3 a.m. Oh my God.
You gave us an hour of your time, Dennis. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure. Good luck with your stuff.
Thank you for listening to Everyone Is. Everyone Is produced and edited by Chris Hawkinson. Executive producer is Aaron Dussault. Music by Doug Infinite. Our logo and graphic design is by Harrison Parker, and I am Jen Coronado. Everyone Is a Slightly Disappointed Productions production, dropping every other Thursday wherever podcasts are available. Make sure to rate and review, and maybe even like and subscribe. Thank you for listening.